The music hall was quiet except for the soft shuffling of feet and the occasional squeak of the piano bench. A pianist was sitting at the grand piano, going through a few notes, his fingers moving across the keys with careful precision. He was focused, lost in the rhythm of practice, the kind of concentration that made the outside world disappear. The smell of polished wood mixed with a faint hint of dust filled the air, making the room feel like a small world of its own. As he played, he noticed movement from the corner of his eye. A small boy was standing near the doorway, barely making a sound, watching the pianist with wide, curious eyes. The boy looked nervous, shuffling his feet and clutching something small in his hand. He was wearing simple clothes, a little worn at the edges, but there was a brightness in his eyes that made him hard to ignore. The pianist paused, leaning back on the bench. He raised an eyebrow and watched the boy closely. The boy hesitated, then took a small step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can I perform for a moment?" he asked, looking at the pianist with a mixture of hope and fear. The pianist blinked. The question caught him completely off guard. He had expected someone curious, maybe a parent with a child who wanted to try the piano, but this boy seemed different. There was a seriousness in his tone, a quiet confidence that was unusual for someone so young. The pianist didn't respond right away. He studied the boy, trying to decide whether to allow him to sit at the piano. The boy's eyes were fixed on the keys, almost as if he could already imagine the music that could come from them. The boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his small hands fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "Please," he added, a little louder this time, his eyes pleading. "I just want to play for a moment." The pianist sighed softly, unsure. He was used to adults and professional students who had lessons, who knew how to approach the piano with care and understanding. A small child could easily hurt the instrument or embarrass himself. But something about the boy made him hesitate. There was a calmness in his request, a respect for the piano and the room that made the pianist pause. After a few seconds that felt longer than they actually were, the pianist nodded. "Okay," he said gently. "You can play, but just for a little while." The boy's face lit up instantly, a small smile spreading across his cheeks. He ran to the piano bench, climbed up carefully and sat down. His legs dangled slightly above the floor, but he didn't seem to mind. He took a deep breath, placing his small hands over the keys. The pianist watched, curious now, wondering what kind of music could come from this tiny visitor. For a moment, the boy hesitated, his fingers hovering just above the keys. He looked up at the pianist, who nodded encouragingly. The boy exhaled and pressed down on a key. A single note echoed in the hall, simple but clear. He tried another, then another, and slowly a melody began to form. It was not perfect, not polished, but it had a feeling, a sense of life that was unusual for someone so young. The pianist leaned closer, listening carefully. The boy's hands moved with a surprising ease, each note deliberate and thoughtful. There was something in the way he touched the keys, the gentle pressure and sudden bursts of energy, that made the room feel warmer. Even the dust motes in the sunlight seemed to dance along with the sound. The pianist's curiosity grew with every passing second. As the boy continued, other people in the hall started to notice. A cleaner paused with a mop in hand. A few visitors stopped walking, and even a couple of musicians from another room leaned toward the doorway to hear the sound. The boy was playing with a quiet intensity, as if the music was something he had known all his life. His eyes closed briefly, his fingers moving faster now, more confident, and the melody became richer, almost like it was telling a story. The pianist felt a shiver run down his spine. He had heard many students over the years, some with talent, some with dedication, but this child was different. There was a raw emotion in the music, a depth that he couldn't explain. He realized he was holding his breath, completely absorbed in what was happening in front of him. The boy's playing was not just notes and rhythm. It was feeling, expression, life itself poured out through tiny hands. The boy opened his eyes briefly, looked at the pianist, and smiled. The pianist returned the smile, astonished at the courage and honesty in that small gesture. It was clear that the boy was not trying to impress anyone, not seeking praise, just sharing something he loved, something deeply personal. The pianist felt a mix of admiration and a strange, protective instinct. This boy deserved to be heard, to be encouraged, and maybe even guided. As the melody continued, the pianist's mind wandered for a moment. He thought about the boy's life, what brought him here, and what stories might be hidden behind that simple request. Was he self-taught? Did he come from a musical family? Or was this pure talent, emerging from hours of quiet practice, unnoticed by anyone else? There was a mystery to him, a richness that went beyond the music itself. The hall seemed to shrink around them, the soft hum of the city outside fading away. It was just the boy, the piano, and the music. Each note seemed to hang in the air, connecting the pianist and the boy in a way words could not. For the first time in a long while, the pianist felt something he hadn't felt in years, pure wonder, the kind of astonishment that makes you forget time. After a few minutes, the boy slowed, the melody softening, then stopping completely. He sat still for a moment, looking at his hands, as if surprised that the music had ended. The pianist exhaled slowly, trying to let the feeling linger, but he knew he needed to respond. He leaned over, speaking gently, almost reverently. "That was incredible," he said. "You have a gift." The boy's smile widened, a mixture of pride and shyness. He looked down at his hands, fidgeting slightly. "Thank you," he whispered. "I just like playing." The pianist nodded, understanding immediately. It wasn't about fame or attention. It was about the music itself, the joy of creating something beautiful. He felt a deep respect for the boy, a connection that transcended age and experience. He realized that this moment, this unexpected meeting, was something rare and precious. As the boy slid off the bench, the pianist helped him steady his footing. People in the hall started to clap softly, not out of obligation, but out of genuine admiration. The boy blushed, ducking his head, but there was a quiet pride in the way he stood. The pianist placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said, "Keep playing. Never stop." The boy nodded, his eyes bright with determination and curiosity. He took one last look at the piano before stepping back, and the pianist knew this was only the beginning. Something had shifted, a moment that would stay with him forever. The boy had not only played music, he had awakened a sense of wonder, a reminder of why music mattered in the first place. The pianist returned to the keys, but the room felt different now, charged with the energy the boy had brought. He played again, this time with a lightness in his touch, remembering the small hands that had just shared a gift. The boy lingered for a moment, watching quietly, then disappeared down the hall, leaving behind a memory that would not fade. And in that quiet music hall, the pianist realized that sometimes the smallest voices carry the loudest messages, and that true talent often arrives when it is least expected, with a simple question. "Can I perform for a moment?" After the boy had stepped away, the pianist sat quietly, still feeling the echo of the notes lingering in the air. He rubbed his hands together and leaned back, trying to process what had just happened. It was unusual to see such raw, natural talent in someone so young, and it left him both amazed and curious. The boy's performance was simple in its beginning, but it had evolved into something deeper, more expressive, almost as if the piano itself had found a voice through the child. The next morning, the pianist couldn't stop thinking about the boy. He replayed the melody over and over in his mind, each note carrying a sense of wonder and surprise. He wondered where the boy had learned to play like that. There were so many children who tried piano lessons and gave up after a few months, but this child had not only practiced but had imbued his music with feeling. It was not just about skill. It was about connection, about touching something invisible and giving it life through sound. Curiosity got the better of him. The pianist decided to leave the piano open and unattended that day, hoping somehow that the boy might return. Hours passed, the sunlight shifting through the windows, painting patterns on the polished floor. A few people came and went, glancing at the piano with interest, but no one approached it the way the boy had. And then, just as the sun began to lower in the sky, he saw him. The same small boy, carrying the quiet determination that had struck the pianist the day before. His eyes scanned the room, finding the piano, and he approached slowly, as if stepping into a space that belonged to someone else but also to him. The pianist didn't say anything at first. He simply watched as the boy climbed onto the bench again. This time, the boy's confidence was more visible. He placed his hands over the keys and looked at the pianist with a tiny, hopeful smile. The pianist nodded, silently inviting him to play, and the boy began. The notes started softly, delicate and cautious, as if he were testing the room, the air, and the instrument itself. But gradually, his fingers moved more freely, producing melodies that were richer, more complex than before. There was a rhythm that felt natural, unforced, flowing with emotion that seemed too big for such small hands. The pianist leaned in, fascinated. He had seen many students over the years, many of them trained and disciplined, but this child's music carried something unique. It wasn't just practice, it was feeling. Every note seemed to tell a story, and every pause seemed intentional. The melody rose and fell like waves, gentle and strong, calm and sudden, carrying a life of its own. He could not tell if the boy understood the music in technical terms, but he could feel that he understood it in a way that mattered more. As the boy continued, the room seemed to change. It was no longer just a music hall. It had become a place of magic, where sound could shape the air and touch hearts. Dust sparkled in the fading sunlight, dancing along with the rhythm, unnoticed by the boy but visible to the pianist. The notes seemed to linger longer than usual, echoing in corners, wrapping around the walls, filling every space with a sense of wonder. The pianist noticed a subtle movement in the boy's expression, a slight furrowing of the brows, the curve of his lips, and realized how deeply he was concentrating. This was more than talent. It was passion. Time seemed to stop. The pianist forgot about his own work, the hours he had spent planning, rehearsing, and performing. All that mattered now was the music flowing from the boy's hands. People in the hall stopped to listen. A janitor leaning against the wall quietly watched, holding a mop and leaning slightly forward, eyes wide. A few musicians from other rooms peeked from behind doors, whispering in amazement to each other. Even the visitors in the hall paused, feeling drawn to something they could not explain. The boy had created a presence without words, a quiet authority that spoke only through the piano. The pianist noticed that the boy's technique had changed subtly. He had learned to control the dynamics, the softness and strength of each note, without losing the warmth of his touch. There was a rhythm to the pauses, a careful balance that made the music breathe naturally. Each hand worked independently but harmoniously, a sign of skill far beyond his age. The pianist realized that this child must have spent hours alone, exploring, experimenting, discovering music in his own way. There was a maturity here that could not be taught in a lesson or a classroom. At one point, the boy's music shifted, a sudden change from gentle, flowing melody to sharp, energetic chords. It was as if he wanted to show all sides of his talent, from the quietest whisper to the boldest cry. The pianist felt a lump in his throat. He had never seen such freedom and control combined in someone so young. There was no hesitation, no fear. The boy was completely immersed, and through that, the pianist could feel a story unfolding, a journey of emotion that was entirely his own. When the boy finally paused, he looked up at the pianist. There was a breathless moment of silence, the kind that makes you realize how much life can fit into a single instant. The pianist, moved beyond words, slowly clapped, careful not to startle the boy. Others in the hall joined in, softly at first, then with more warmth. The boy blushed, ducking his head slightly, but there was a pride in the way he held himself. He had shared something precious, and the world had acknowledged it. After a short pause, the pianist spoke gently. "Your music, it's incredible. You have a way of speaking without words that very few people have. How did you learn to play like this?" He leaned forward, his eyes searching the boys for answers, ready to hear a story, to understand the journey that had brought this music to life. The boy's hands twitched slightly over the keys, a nervous habit. I just practice a lot at home," he said quietly. "Sometimes I listen to music and try to play it. Sometimes I just make up my own songs. I like playing because it makes me happy." His eyes were honest, shining with a combination of shyness and pride. "I don't go to lessons. I just play." The pianist nodded slowly, impressed. It was rare to see such dedication and creativity without formal guidance. The boy's love for music was pure, untainted by competition or expectation. It was for him a personal joy, a language he could speak when words were not enough. The pianist felt a growing sense of responsibility, a desire to nurture and encourage this talent, to help it grow without diminishing its authenticity. He stood and approached the piano, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have something special," he said. "Keep playing, keep exploring, and never let anyone make you feel small because of it. Music like yours deserves to be heard." The boy's eyes brightened at these words. He nodded earnestly, a quiet determination in his gaze. He understood that this was more than a compliment. It was encouragement, a recognition that his efforts and passion mattered. The boy stayed a while longer, playing more melodies, experimenting with chords and rhythms, each one different from the last. The pianist observed closely, occasionally offering gentle suggestions, but mostly letting the boy guide himself. It was a collaboration, though silent, a conversation through music. The hall was alive with sound, emotion, and energy, each note carrying the boy's essence, each pause a breath in his story. As the afternoon light faded into evening, the boy finally stood and stepped away from the piano. The pianist helped him steady his footing, smiling warmly. "You've done something amazing today," he said. "Remember this feeling, and let it guide you." The boy nodded, a small, shy smile on his lips, and walked toward the door, but not before looking back once more at the piano, a silent promise lingering in the air. The pianist sat back down at the piano, his mind still racing with thoughts and emotions. He began to play again, but his hands moved with a lighter touch, inspired by what he had just witnessed. The music felt different now, enriched by the boy's spirit, a reminder of how unexpected encounters can awaken something in us that we didn't know existed. The hall seemed warmer, fuller, and the notes hung in the air longer, carrying with them a sense of hope, wonder, and the quiet magic of a child's gift. In that moment, the pianist realized that talent was more than technique. It was heart, curiosity, and courage. And sometimes, it comes to us in the smallest packages, asking only for a chance. "Can I perform for a moment?" The next day, the pianist arrived at the hall earlier than usual. He couldn't stop thinking about the boy and the music he had shared. Something about that small, earnest face and the fearless way he approached the piano had stayed with him. He had spent the night replaying the melodies in his mind, imagining the tiny hands moving over the keys, the expression in the boy's eyes, the sense of life that seemed to pour out of every note. It was not just talent. It was feeling, depth, and a kind of understanding that left the pianist both inspired and unsettled. The hall was quiet, with only the soft hum of the lights and the distant sound of traffic outside. He sat at the piano, his fingers brushing lightly over the keys, and played a few notes to test the sound. The room seemed calm, almost expectant, as if it knew something important was about to happen. He wondered if the boy would return today, if he would dare to play again, and if his music would be the same as yesterday or something entirely new. The anticipation made his heart beat faster, not from nervousness, but from curiosity and hope. And then, just as the morning sunlight began to stream through the tall windows, the boy appeared. He moved with quiet confidence, yet there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, a small question that seemed to ask, "Will I be allowed again?" The pianist smiled warmly, nodding for him to come closer. The boy climbed onto the bench, sitting upright with a straight back, hands resting gently on the keys. There was a determination in his posture, a readiness to share his music, and the pianist could see that this time he was prepared to give everything he had. The first few notes were soft and simple, almost shy, but as the melody unfolded, it grew more complex, weaving a story that the pianist could feel but not name. It was a story of joy and sadness, of excitement and calm, a tapestry of emotions expressed without a single word. The boy's fingers moved with precision and freedom at the same time, a balance that made the music flow naturally, like water moving over rocks. Each note seemed intentional, yet effortless, as if the piano itself responded to his touch with understanding and cooperation. The pianist leaned closer, listening intently. There was a subtlety in the boy's playing that made every phrase feel alive. He noticed how the boy used pauses, the small moments of silence that made the music breathe and gave it weight. The dynamics changed seamlessly, the softest whispers growing into sudden bursts of strength. It was clear that the boy felt every note deeply, and the pianist realized that this was more than skill. It was intuition, empathy, and a rare connection between human and instrument. People passing by the hall noticed the music again. They stopped and listened, drawn in by the sound that seemed to tell a story beyond the ordinary. A young couple lingered at the doorway, their eyes wide with surprise. A janitor leaning against a wall shifted slightly forward, intrigued. Even the musicians practicing in other rooms paused, caught by the unexpected beauty of the boy's playing. It was not loud or showy, but quiet and powerful, the kind of music that makes people stop and listen without realizing why. The boy's expression changed as he played, reflecting the music. At times, his eyebrows furrowed slightly, concentrating on the passage. Other times, his lips curved into a small smile, a secret joy that no one else could see but the pianist. His eyes sparkled when a chord resonated beautifully, and he would close them for a moment, lost entirely in the music. The pianist was captivated. He had spent years mastering his craft, yet he had never encountered someone who could convey emotion so clearly and naturally at such a young age. As the melody reached a particularly intense section, the boy's hands moved faster, more assured, yet still controlled. There was an energy in the room now, a kind of electric tension that made every note feel alive. The pianist realized that the boy was not just performing. He was communicating, speaking directly to anyone who would listen. The music had a personality, a character, almost like a living being telling a story through sound. And the boy, though small and quiet, was its voice. The pianist noticed how the boy's technique had evolved since the previous day. There was confidence in his movements, a subtle mastery of timing and touch that suggested hours of private practice. Each hand worked independently, yet harmoniously, the melody flowing naturally, the harmonies ringing clearly. It was clear that the boy understood the piano in a way most children his age could not just the keys, but the expression, the feeling behind each note. When he finally paused, there was a moment of silence that seemed almost sacred. The room felt still, holding its breath. The pianist looked at the boy, who was now slightly flushed from effort, eyes shining with pride and satisfaction. "That was incredible," he said softly, almost reverently. "You tell stories with your music in a way very few people can. I've never seen anything like it." The boy's hands twitched nervously over the keys. I just play what I feel," he said quietly, almost shyly. "Sometimes I make mistakes, but it sounds right in my head, so I keep playing." The pianist nodded, impressed by the honesty and simplicity of his words. "That is the most important thing," he said. "Music is about feeling, about expression, not just perfection. You have a gift because you feel it so deeply." They spoke for a while, the boy explaining how he practiced at home, how he listened to music and tried to understand it, how he sometimes composed little songs of his own. He talked about the joy of discovering a melody, the excitement of making the piano sing in a way that was only his. The pianist listened, absorbing every word, realizing that this child's understanding of music went far beyond technique. It was intuitive, instinctive, a natural connection to something larger than himself. The pianist decided to encourage the boy further. He suggested small exercises to explore different emotions in music, to experiment with soft and loud passages, fast and slow sections, all while keeping the music true to his feelings. The boy followed eagerly, absorbing the advice with a hunger to learn, yet never losing his own voice. It was a delicate balance, and the pianist was careful to guide without imposing, to teach without controlling. Hours passed unnoticed. The boy played, experimenting with new melodies and revisiting old ones, each time discovering something new. The pianist watched, occasionally offering a nod, a smile, or a gentle correction. The room was filled with music and energy, a shared understanding developing between teacher and student, though unspoken. It was a connection built on respect, trust, and the pure love of music. By late afternoon, the boy finally paused, leaning back slightly, hands resting in his lap. He looked at the pianist, tired but satisfied, a quiet sense of accomplishment in his eyes. The pianist smiled warmly. "You have a rare gift," he said. "Keep playing, keep feeling, and never let anyone make you doubt what you can do. Your music can touch people in ways words never could." The boy nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of the words even at his young age. He had discovered something precious, a language he could speak without fear, a way to share himself with the world. And the pianist, too, felt changed. He had witnessed something extraordinary, a reminder that true talent can appear in the most unexpected places, and that it carries with it a power to inspire, to move, and to connect people in ways that are deeply human. As the boy left the hall that day, the pianist returned to the keys, but the room felt different now. It was alive with the echoes of the music, with the presence of a child who had shared not just notes, but his spirit. The hall seemed warmer, richer, and the sound of the piano carried a new sense of possibility, a reminder of the small miracles that could occur when talent and courage meet. And as the pianist played, he thought of the boy's question, simple yet profound. "Can I perform for a moment?" It was more than a question. It was an invitation, an opening into a world where music could speak for the soul, and where even the smallest hands could create something unforgettable. The days that followed were filled with quiet anticipation. The pianist found himself arriving at the hall earlier and leaving later, hoping the boy would return. He could not stop thinking about the melodies, the depth of expression, and the courage it took for a small child to ask to perform in front of strangers. Each time he thought of that simple question, "Can I perform for a moment?" he felt a new respect for the bravery and honesty it showed. Then, one afternoon, the boy appeared again. He walked in slowly, carrying a small notebook under his arm, as if it held something important. His eyes lit up when he saw the pianist, and he ran to the piano bench, climbing up with careful movements. This time he did not hesitate. He placed the notebook beside him and rested his hands on the keys, ready to share what he had been working on. The pianist watched, fascinated. He noticed a new confidence in the boy's posture, a sense that he had been practicing not just the piano, but also how to present himself to the world. When the boy began to play, the melody was familiar in some ways, echoing the pieces from before, but there was something new, something more complex and richer in emotion. The boy's fingers moved with precision and freedom, exploring the piano in ways that were both playful and profound. Each note seemed to tell a story, a personal tale that only he could express. The pianist listened closely. He noticed the boy experimenting with different tones, soft and loud, slow and fast, blending emotions with technical skill. It was clear that the boy had been thinking about the music deeply, reflecting on how it made him feel and how it could make others feel. The boy's eyes would close sometimes as he played, a small smile appearing when he found a sound that pleased him. It was not about perfection. It was about expression, and the pianist felt honored to witness it. After a while, the boy paused and looked at the pianist. "I wrote some music here," he said quietly, opening the notebook. The pages were filled with notes, small sketches of melodies, and words describing how the music should feel. "I wanted to show you what I've been thinking about." The pianist took the notebook carefully, flipping through the pages. He could see the thought and care the boy had put into it. It was remarkable for someone his age, a glimpse into a mind that understood both the heart and the mechanics of music. They spent the afternoon together. The pianist suggested small adjustments to the boy's compositions, explaining how certain chords could change the emotion, how pauses could create tension or relief. But he did so gently, careful not to take away the boy's own voice. The boy listened intently, trying the suggestions immediately, and sometimes smiling when the sound matched what he had imagined. There was a collaboration forming, silent and respectful. A connection that was stronger than any lesson could provide. Other people in the hall began to notice the boy again. Musicians practicing nearby stopped and leaned toward the doorway, curious. A few visitors paused to listen, quietly amazed at the sight of a small child commanding the piano with such skill and sensitivity. The boy, however, seemed focused entirely on the music, oblivious to the audience. He was lost in the joy of creating, exploring the sound, and expressing himself. As the day went on, the pianist asked the boy about his experiences at home, how he learned, and what inspired him. The boy spoke simply, honestly. He described practicing every day, sometimes alone, sometimes with family. He talked about listening to recordings of famous musicians, trying to understand why their music moved him. But above all, he emphasized the importance of playing what he felt, not what others expected. The pianist felt a deep admiration for this approach, recognizing that it was rare and precious. The conversation turned to opportunities. The pianist suggested that the boy could perform for small audiences outside the hall, perhaps at community events or local concerts. The boy's eyes widened, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had never thought about performing for people outside this hall. The pianist reassured him, explaining that music was meant to be shared, that the world could benefit from his gift. But he also emphasized that it should be done at the boy's own pace, never forced or rushed. Over the following weeks, the boy returned regularly. Each time he brought something new, an idea, a melody, or a rhythm he had discovered. The pianist guided him gently, nurturing his creativity while respecting his individuality. They explored music in ways that were playful and serious, experimental and structured. The boy's skills continued to grow, but so did his confidence and understanding. It was clear that the boy was not just learning piano. He was learning about himself, about expression, and about the power of his own voice. One afternoon, the pianist suggested a small recital within the hall, inviting a few trusted musicians and friends to listen. The boy was hesitant at first, unsure if he was ready. But after some encouragement, he agreed. When the day arrived, he climbed onto the bench with his usual quiet determination. He opened the notebook, glanced at the pages, and began to play. The music was delicate at first, but it grew in complexity and beauty as he progressed. Every note carried emotion, every pause held meaning, and the audience was silent, absorbed, moved. The pianist watched proudly, realizing that the boy had achieved something remarkable. It was not just talent. It was courage, dedication, and a deep understanding of music as a form of expression. The audience clapped softly at the end, not out of obligation, but out of genuine appreciation for the beauty they had witnessed. The boy blushed, looking down at his hands, but there was a quiet pride in the way he held himself. He had shared his music with the world, even in a small way, and it had been heard and understood. After the recital, the pianist spoke to the boy privately. "You did something wonderful today," he said. "Not just in the way you played, but in the way you shared your music. Never forget that what you feel matters, and that your music can touch people's hearts." The boy nodded, absorbing the words. He understood that music was more than notes on a page. It was a language of the soul, a way to connect with others and express what could not be said in words. The pianist smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction and hope. He knew that this was just the beginning of the boy's journey, and that the impact of his music would reach far beyond the walls of the hall. As the day ended, the boy left the hall, carrying his notebook and a quiet sense of accomplishment. The pianist returned to the piano, but the room felt different now. It was filled with the echoes of shared music, the presence of a young mind that had dared to dream and express. The piano seemed to hum with possibility, and the pianist played a few notes, inspired by the boy's courage and talent. In that moment, the pianist realized that teaching and mentorship were not just about instruction. They were about connection, about recognizing potential and nurturing it without extinguishing the individual spark. The boy had reminded him of the beauty of discovery, of the joy of expression, and the power of sharing one's gift with the world. And in return, the pianist had offered guidance, encouragement, and belief in the boy's potential. The hall, quiet and still, seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the small miracle that had unfolded. And the pianist knew that, in time, the boy would touch many more hearts with his music, leaving a mark that could never be erased. All it had taken was a simple question, asked with courage and honesty. "Can I perform for a moment?" Time passed, and the boy continued to return to the music hall regularly. Each visit brought something new, a melody, an idea, or an emotion expressed through the piano. The pianist watched with growing admiration as the boy's confidence blossomed. His skills deepened, and his understanding of music became more profound. It was clear that this child was not just talented, but gifted in a way that could inspire and touch others. One afternoon, the pianist suggested something new. He proposed that the boy play at a small community event, a local gathering where people would come to enjoy music and meet neighbors. The boy looked hesitant at first, unsure about performing in front of strangers outside the hall. But after some encouragement, he agreed. The pianist reassured him that it was not about impressing anyone but sharing the joy of music. The boy understood and nodded, determination shining in his eyes. On the day of the event, the hall was filled with a small audience, some familiar faces and many new ones. The boy stepped onto the stage, his hands clutching the edge of the piano bench for a moment before sitting down. He opened his notebook, glanced at his notes, and placed his fingers on the keys. The audience fell silent, sensing something special was about to happen. He began to play. The first notes were soft, inviting the listeners into his world. As he continued, the music grew more confident, weaving a story of emotions, surprises, and subtle beauty. His fingers moved with precision and freedom, creating a melody that felt alive and personal. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, listening not just with their ears but with their hearts. The pianist watched from the side, proud and moved, realizing that the boy was ready to share his music beyond the hall. The boy's performance flowed effortlessly. He shifted from gentle, delicate passages to bold, expressive chords, showing control and understanding beyond his years. There was a clarity in every note, a connection that spoke directly to the listeners. Some closed their eyes, swaying slightly, completely absorbed. Others smiled softly, recognizing the rare gift before them. The boy did not seek attention or praise. He simply played from the heart, letting the music tell the story. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause, some standing, others clapping with tears in their eyes. The boy blushed, looking down at his hands, a shy smile forming on his lips. He had faced a new experience, shared his music with strangers, and received acknowledgement not for showmanship but for authenticity. The pianist approached him afterward, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You have touched many hearts today," he said. "Remember this feeling and keep it with you." The boy nodded quietly, understanding the significance of the moment. He realized that music was more than notes or performance. It was a way to communicate, to share feelings and stories that words could not capture. The pianist guided him through reflections afterward, talking about how to stay true to himself, how to nurture his gift, and how to use it responsibly. The boy listened carefully, absorbing the advice while keeping his own creative spirit alive. As weeks turned into months, the boy began to perform more often, each time with increasing confidence and skill. He attended small recitals, local community events, and even private gatherings, always playing from the heart. The pianist continued to mentor him, offering guidance and encouragement while allowing the boy to explore his own ideas. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and a shared love for music. People started noticing the boy's talent more widely. Musicians, teachers, and music lovers spoke of him with admiration. Some offered lessons and opportunities, but the pianist always reminded the boy to choose what felt right, to stay connected to his music and not lose sight of the joy it brought him. The boy was cautious, wise beyond his years, taking each step carefully and thoughtfully. He wanted to grow, but he also wanted to keep the integrity of his gift intact. One day, the pianist invited a group of young musicians to the hall to hear the boy play. They watched, amazed at the ease with which he expressed himself, the clarity of his melodies, and the depth of emotion in each piece. The boy played for them, answering questions, explaining his approach, and sharing insights about creativity and feeling. He was no longer just a small child asking to perform. He was becoming a young musician capable of inspiring others, showing that dedication, courage, and authenticity mattered as much as skill. The boy continued to explore, experimenting with new sounds, rhythms, and compositions. He sometimes composed pieces that reflected his own experiences, emotions, and dreams. The pianist guided him, helping refine his ideas without taking away the boy's individuality. Together, they discovered that music was not just about notes and technique but about telling a story, sharing a message, and connecting with people on a human level. Over time, the boy began to understand the impact his music could have on others. He noticed how people reacted, how a simple melody could make someone smile, bring back memories, or offer comfort. He realized that his gift was not just for him but could be used to bring joy and meaning to others. This understanding shaped the way he played, adding intention and thoughtfulness to his natural talent. The pianist watched with pride as the boy grew. He saw a young person developing not just skill but character, learning patience, empathy, and humility. He understood that true talent was not measured only by technique but by the ability to connect, inspire, and persevere. And in this boy, he saw all of these qualities emerging, nurtured by his own guidance but, more importantly, by the boy's dedication and love for music. Years later, the boy continued to play, sharing his music with larger audiences, performing at concerts, and teaching others what he had learned. The pianist remained a mentor, a guide, and a friend, always reminding him to stay true to himself. The simple question that had started it all, "Can I perform for a moment?" had transformed not just the boy's life but also the pianist's, reminding him of the wonder of discovery, the power of encouragement, and the magic of sharing one's gift. In the quiet moments, when the boy returned to the hall and sat at the piano, he often remembered that first day, the nerves, the hope, and the courage it took to ask. He understood that every note he played carried a part of himself, and that music was a way to touch the hearts of others. The pianist watched him, smiling, knowing that the boy had grown into someone capable of making the world a little brighter with each performance. And so, the story of the small boy who asked, "Can I perform for a moment?" became a story of courage, talent, and the profound impact that a single moment can have. Through music, the boy had not only discovered his own voice, but had also reminded everyone around him of the beauty of expression, the power of kindness, and the importance of nurturing dreams. His journey was a testament to the fact that talent, when combined with heart, humility, and perseverance, can create ripples that touch countless lives, far beyond the walls of a single music hall.